what my hope and my dream for our culture is that we're raising men, we're stewarding and growing men who are deeply connected to their sense of personal power and able to get a lot of bold and audacious things done for themselves in the community, while also raising men who are connected to their heart and connected to those that their own kind of sensitivity and their own inner landscape, so that they have the capacity to use that power for good.
My guest today is Luke Entrup. Luke is the founder of the Father-Son Connection Experience, where he helps fathers and sons forge meaningful connections and establish rites of passage. Luke has devoted himself to helping men and fathers rediscover the ancient wisdom of initiation, the thresholds that mark the journey from boyhood to manhood. He's been featured on stages and in conversations around the world for his work in reintroducing rites of passage into modern life. And he and I share a passion around equipping parents with the tools to raise boys into grounded, courageous, and compassionate men. Luke, it is an honor to have you on Raising Men. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Shaun. Yeah, thrilled to be here and just really excited about what you're up to with this show. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
One of the themes that I've noticed since starting on this journey is that the institutions that guided us into manhood in the past are now disintegrating. And you know, that can be a good thing because we're not trapped into the rigid confines of tradition anymore, and we can forge our own path, which is nice. But that freedom can also leave us rudderless, right? Now, you've studied and facilitated rites of passage for years. So why are these thresholds so essential for boys? And what are the consequences when they're missing in the culture?
Yeah, I mean, what a great question, Shaun. So this is, I think, one of the more fundamental things we're wrestling with right now as a culture. And so maybe it's helpful just to define what we mean by a rite of passage, just to kind of level set here. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Yeah. So a rite of passage is marking moving from one way of being into the next, right? And as humans, there's several key inflection points in our development. Obviously, the first one is birth, right? We come into this world and there's a celebration, there's an announcement, the tribe, the community honors that moment. And the most significant one after that is death, right? Everyone comes together, honors that, right? But there are myriad moments of changing from one way of being into the next throughout one's life. And some of the most important moments happen developmentally on that path for our boys into manhood, right? And throughout human history, we had these ways to do that. We would, and some cultures still do this, especially those that live closer to the earth, where they would send the boy out into the forest on a hunt, and he either came back or he didn't. And if he came back, he was then a man, right? Some of the religious institutions you refer to, institutions are crumbling, but there are religious institutions that still do this. There's the, the bar mitzvah or the confirmation, right? There's a marking of you were a boy, you're now a man, or you're shifting from one way of being into the next. And as institutions have crumbled, that part of us that's, I believe, baked into our DNA, this need for recognizing ceremonially and ritually recognizing, moving from one stage of life into the next, as those have broken down, the need beneath that has not. It still lives in us as humans. And so we go looking for it, right? And we can look for it in some pretty dangerous and maladaptive ways if it's not done really well. And, we see this through, kind of the classic example that people always give is gang initiations, right? For those that are really struggling with poverty and not having a sense of belonging, not having, the steady presence of masculine role models, these young boys will do just about anything for that sense of belonging that it provides. But there's a lot of other ways that this shows up maladaptively. And so that's what we're doing. We view this as like 200-year project, right? We want to reintroduce these sacred rites of passage, marking one way of being into the next to help our boys on the path to manhood. It's going to take generations. They've mostly been lost in our culture, and we're here to reintroduce them.
It strikes me that one of the opportunities that we have as a result of the institutions crumbling and the rites of passage going away is we can now rebuild them intentionally. And so what are the thresholds? What would the thresholds been traditionally? And what do you see as the opportunity for marking even additional thresholds that maybe traditional cultures didn't recognize for one reason or another, but might be really useful for our modern community?
Yeah, well, so there's this great author, Bill Plotkin. He talks about the different moments of development from childhood into adulthood, right? Mm-hmm. And the two big ones that I'm really focused on in my work, and that I think we can mark, especially we can talk about girls becoming women, but my work's really about boys reaching that path to manhood. So there's two big ones, right? The right. First is the movement from childhood into adolescence. It's when the human body starts to change, puberty hits. But also what's happening socially is there's a sense of like really coming into the body and there's an impulse to start focusing on mastery, becoming good at something, and through a sense of belonging. So this is where we see sports teams really important. Like this is that 10 to 14-year-old. Bands, for me, it was, I was an actor, so finding community and real mastery in performance. And so it can be whatever it is for that child. For my son, he's into mountain biking, right? So it's this movement of like really getting very good at something, and with that comes that tribal sense of belonging. The next one, which is thoroughly studied, and there's a lot of work that happens around this. It's from adolescence into childhood. This is the initiation into manhood, right? Yeah. And this happens a little later. This is like 17 to 20, right? Where they're no longer a boy, they're now a man, they're out on their own. It's much more about independence rather than that sense of tribal belonging. And it's about going out and making one's mark in the world. And we see this, traditionally, this is where, the boys would get ripped from the arms of their mothers, okay, right, by the elders of the village, and they'd be taken out and taught the ways of what it means to be a man in this culture. They'd face some sort of ordeal, some sort of hardship, and then they'd be welcomed back into the community. And oftentimes it was dangerous. Initiation isn't meant to be comfortable. So that happens a little later, right, into the initiation into manhood.
So, I think about a lot of the issues that I have, with my own journey in fatherhood and with my son in particular, is wrestling with this tension that we have, that my son has, between he wants to belong and he wants to be nurtured, but he also wants to be independent. And oftentimes we'll find, we end up having fights where he will run away from us, but say, I just want love. And those are those two things in tension. And it seems to me that what you're describing is actually creating a ritual around solidifying exactly those things. You're solidifying the community and the belonging first, and then you're solidifying the independence, or maybe the power to make your way in the world now that you're part of the community. Does that ring true?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, like I said, there's many ways to initiate. It can happen consciously or unconsciously. What my hope and my dream for our culture is that we're raising men, we're stewarding and growing men who are deeply connected to their sense of personal power and able to get a lot of bold and audacious things done for themselves in the community, while also raising men who are connected to their heart and connected to their own kind of sensitivity and their own inner landscape, so that they have the capacity to use that power for good, right? A heart-connected power. So that's initiation. It's moving from one way of being into the next. That's what the work that we're doing. We're trying to steward that. But there's many forms of initiation, right? There's just the power over type of initiation that can happen. If we're not doing this intentionally, it will happen. These boys will find a sense of belonging somewhere, whether it's through, unfettered greed in the world and running roughshod over our planet, or all the other maladaptive ways that it can happen. So what is the new way of being we're wanting to move our boys as they become men into? And for me, that's like heart-centered power, right? And so I think that's what you're talking about, that sense of connection, that sense of love, the loving presence of the child connected to the parent, that stewards the sense of emotional regulation in them. But at the same time, we want to be able to move our boys into a sense of real, not power over, but power with empowerment, right? True empowerment.
I love that concept of power with or empowerment versus power over. It's almost like power over is an expression of weakness, whereas empowerment is an expression of strength. I really like that formulation.
Yeah, and I mean this bears out. Look at it through the lens of emotional intelligence, the research around emotional intelligence in the business world. I work a lot with executives and CEOs, and there's a lot of research that shows the higher up you get in an organization, the more important it is to be able to read what's happening in the inner landscape of other people and in myself, and then be able to articulate that. That's emotional intelligence. There is a tremendous amount of power in that. Power to get things done, to motivate people, to inspire people. When I can really get a read on my inner landscape, that's really good information. If I have some concern or something's arising in me, it's very good information to be able to track that and articulate it, and then to be able to read that in other people. So this is where I say, this is like, I'm a firm believer that sensitivity and emotional intelligence is a superpower. You want to be more powerful in the world, get clear about what's happening in your inner landscape. And the same can be said for our children, right? The more we teach them that, the more ability they'll have to navigate the world skillfully.
I would also argue that as our culture becomes more modern, that those skills become even more important. They were less important 20 years ago than they are today. And 20 years from now, they will be even more important. And we as men do not come out of the box with those skills. And so we need to build them. We need to work them.
Yeah, not only do we not come out of the box, but it's actually, there's still this cultural pressure to damp them down, desensitize ourselves to our own emotional landscape, right? The Buddhists talk about this concept of one eye in, one eye out, right? In meditation, we have one eye out in the world, where we're kind of observing the phenomenal world in front of us, whether we're watching the sunrise or whatever it is that's happening out there, but then also having one eye in to track our inner landscape. That is real power, to be able to have an eye in and an eye out. And that's a lot of what we teach around, in these rites of passage, is cultivating that deep sense of inner awareness while also being able to navigate the world.
I like that formulation as well. Now, we've talked a lot about the benefits of the traditions of transitions and rites and that sort of thing. Were there drawbacks, and are there drawbacks to those traditions? What are some of the pitfalls that arise from doing those things?
In ancient times?
Yeah, in ancient times, and then more importantly, if we're to adapt those traditions to modern times, what should we watch out for?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously some of this stuff now is completely unnecessary for the survival of the tribe. There's to go out and kill a lion or maybe be killed, totally unnecessary in the modern era. I mean, I'm looking out at
the
this.
Physical danger aspect is not as important.
It's not as important, but it was back then, right? Because there was even this sense of someone lost in an initiation was an offering up to the idea that the tribe and the community needed initiation to survive. A tribe led by uninitiated men is very dangerous in the eyes of the traditional cultures. And I think we see that today in our culture. We have a lot of boys in male bodies running our culture, right, that did not get proper initiation, and we see all the downstream impacts. So in ancient times, it was much more of a survival mechanism, and they viewed that physical danger as an offering up. I don't think we need that level of physical danger. Although we see some version of that in the military, right? It's not an entirely safe thing to go through, rigorous military training, and right. We want that. We want our, we want those that are defending our rights to be sharp, right?
Right. Yeah.
And have no problem with that, right? But for all those that aren't in a military path, there doesn't need to be that level of physical danger, but there better be discomfort, right? And one of the main ingredients of initiation into sacred masculinity is discomfort. It needs to snap us out of the creature comforts of the modern world and put us closer to our own edge and our own, facing our own mortality, facing our own part of us that would rather be sitting on the couch. If we want to be living a bold and audacious life, and we want that for our young men, my belief is it needs to be hard. It just maybe doesn't need to be life-threatening.
Yeah. I want to push on that part a little bit. In a second, I really want to drill down into what those rites of passage should be looking like today and how to find them. But before we get there, I'd love to talk about what happens when boys grow up without the rites of passage. And we touched on it a moment ago. You get boys walking around in men's bodies. But what happens when boys grow up without these thresholds?
Yeah, well, there's something. So one of the elements of initiation is mentorship, and because you're moving in from one way of being into the next, there needs to be someone that's guiding that process. And that largely does not exist currently. We don't have a lot of healthy male role models saying, this is what it means to be a good man in the world, right? So that's part of the challenge, is the absence of that mentorship piece. Then we have this deep need for belonging as humans, and no real construct to step into that is generative and life-giving and protective. That these are the attributes of healthy masculinity. So we start seeing the erosion of that, and there's the sense of belonging overrides all other things, and so without that healthy role modeling, these young men and boys will start looking for belonging in all the wrong places, right? And then you combine that with screens, which is another, very challenging moment we're in culturally. The addictive nature of screens, the way that it kind of distorts reality, and we end up with a recipe for some, what we're seeing, which is like there's a real fundamental illness in the male psyche right now in the modern day,
and the opportunities to catch that illness, it seems, are because of screens and phones and tablets and the internet. The opportunities to catch that illness are so much wider and so much more varied and so much less. If your kid walks in the door smelling like smoke, that he's smoking and you can do something about it. If he's been getting indoctrinated online with some crazy methodology, you may not have any way of knowing.
Yeah. And for him, he has found a sense of belonging that he's not found in the real world, that hasn't been given to him, right? So there's, again, that drive for belonging. We will do just about anything for that.
Yeah. And so if we don't provide a healthy framework, then a toxic framework will take its place, or conflict entrepreneurs will come in and mine that. And it's really our fault, isn't it?
Well, it's one of the, it's when I think when we, guys of our generation, I think we're probably about the same age. Yeah. I think we will look back, in 30, 40 years when our time is up, and we'll think this happened on our watch, right? The erosion of the sense of belonging. It's been happening for the last 50 years, but it really accelerated with the introduction of technology and smartphones in the way, and that's happened on our watch. It's not a thing that you can just solve on an individual level, because it's when one kid in the community has it, it's kind of a race to the bottom, right? Yeah. Because this need for social connection overrides so many things, the drive to get then on a device for a young kid and get on social media and find all the ways to connect with people, not in real life, but digitally, it truly is a race to the bottom. And that's happening on our watch.
But that's an opportunity also. We can make it, if we can be intentional about it, we can turn it into a race to the top, can't we?
Absolutely. And there's so much amazing work happening around it. A fantastic book that I highly recommend to just about anybody that'll read it is The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It really lays out, great book. Yeah, such a great book. Lays out two things. The addictive nature and all the distortions that happen developmentally for young people through the introduction of technology, and the need for independent mobility and the ability to be free range and roam freely without the constant supervision of helicopter parents, right? And I mean, this is like, how do we do that in a one weekend experience? A rite of passage. We unplug people from their phones, we put them out in some on the edge, and we connect them to some role models. Maybe it's the father figure, maybe it's someone else, and we put them through an experience that says, you were this, you were a young, you were a child, now you're a man. You were a younger person, now you're an adolescent, you're on the path of becoming a man, right? And that's where I feel like rites of passage is so important, because it really gets at the two ails of our time for young people: the lack of being able to roam freely and the inundation of technology.
Now, can you give me a sense of your view of what healthy masculinity looks like and how we can cultivate it in our boys? I think you've answered that second part, which is these rites of passage at these two inflection points. But give me a sense of what that healthy masculinity looks like when properly done.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. And I think everybody kind of has their own instinctive sense of what this is. We kind of know, like when you bump into somebody or you think about, I don't know, an uncle or a teacher, you think like, that was a good man, and maybe they didn't necessarily even know what initiation was, but they cared about something greater than themselves. So there's a focus on kind of a transpersonal mission or a sense of caring about the community or those around them. There's a sense of personal integrity. I talked about one, which is like power is connected to the heart rather than just like domination. Yeah. If we look at it at the very highest, like if we just go super kind of esoteric for a moment, the masculine energies in the universe are those of emptiness and space. It's like the cosmos. And then the feminine is like all of the form. It's the earth. It's all the different animals, the creatures, the hurricanes, the volcanoes, right? That's, if we think of it cosmically in these two dance, it's the dance of form and emptiness, light and darkness, right? Yeah. And so, the masculine power is steady, it's patient, it has a deep breath, it has a strong spine, it has an open heart, and it gets things done. It can see what needs to happen and gets things done. This is beyond gender and sex, right? The masculine in all of us, the feminine in all of us. The feminine in me is the emotional, it's the thing that's ever changing, that's always in fluctuation. And so those are, in my opinion, those are like core energies in the cosmos, right? And so healthy masculinity is having that steadiness, that ability to see what needs to happen, that trustworthiness. And for me, that's what it means. I think everybody kind of has their own definition, but people know it when they see it, right? It's kind of one of these things where you know a good man when you see him.
Yeah. Right. I think that the concept of masculine energy and feminine energy in the universe and also in ourselves is very, very important. And I feel like it's a shame that we have decided on terminology that is so bound up with someone's gender, because it's almost like the default is the assumption that, well, a man should just be full of masculine energy and he should have no feminine energy, and a woman should have all feminine energy and have no masculine energy. But of course, every individual has mixtures of both, and even in various times might exhibit properly exhibit the certain energies. And it's almost a shame that our terminology is so binary in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, this is as boys, we learn to squash the emotional, right? It's just not safe. Whether it's through, for me, it was a lot of bullying and kind of, just I grew up in kind of a rough place that had a lot of that feminine was just not allowed in boys, right?
Absolutely.
And
I had the same experiences growing up.
yeah, and so what I've learned over time is actually not only is my power wrapped up in that, my ability, my sensitivity, but also kind of just some of my humanities in that, my ability to like enjoy a beautiful sunset or, the look in my lover's eyes or a snuggle with my children.
So true.
That is my feminine, right? And, so it is a great sorrow that there is this bifurcation. And, to take it a step further, I mean, it's no secret. The first time we say masculinity, when you hear the word masculinity, what's the first word that usually comes to mind in the culture? Toxic, right?
Yeah,
and so
right.
we're up against this battle. Masculinity has been given a bad name. And I think the answer to how do we heal toxic masculinity isn't by squashing masculinity. It's by creating a new frame for what healthy masculinity is.
Yeah.
Right. And that includes the balance and really revering and honoring the feminine in all of her forms in the world and in my own heart.
Yeah, I think that is so true. So let's get down to brass tacks and talk about how I can create meaningful threshold moments at home, or I mean, is it in daily life, or am I looking for specific milestones in my child's development? Is it an age? What do I need to do to create these meaningful threshold moments?
Yeah, what a great question. So there's several things we can do, right? The first is around these inflection points, the major inflection points I've talked about, right? Like 10 to 14 and then 17 to 20, we can go out maybe with some other people in the community, other fathers, other parents, and create these experiences where we get them out in the wild. That's like kind of one end of the spectrum. Then if we dial that back,
that do those sorts of things, or is this
yeah,
is this what the Boy Scouts are for, or what are the how do I find my son's 10? How do I find a group of fathers that is going out and setting up these threshold events?
Well, I have one myself called the Father-Son Connection Experience that we do this for boys.
That.
Yeah. And we do a weekend retreat together. And there are many others. If I'm happy to share other resources if people want them. They can reach out to me. If our program isn't quite right, there are many and this is the thing, right? This is part of the 200-year project. It's a growing movement to reintroduce these, right? So that's, and what I like about this idea is it's not just held by the parents. There's a community element, that's how initiation traditionally works, right? Is that it's especially the older they get, it's not actually the parents that initiate them. It can't be because they're actually breaking free. But at that 10 to 14, it's about cultivating a deeper connection with the parental figure in the presence of the rest of the community, or in this case, we kind of do it. We do it as a group retreat, right? But throughout the year, so one of the things I do with my children is once a year I take them each on a backpacking trip, right? Mm. And we go out, we unplug, we go out into the wild. We spend a few nights under the stars. We jump in cold water. We have run into rattlesnakes and bears and all the crazy stuff that happens in the backcountry. And that in and of itself is a tremendous rite of passage, right? Because we're not on screens, we're in the wild, we're connecting deeply with each other, and we're making memories. And, I do a lot of these types of interviews. And one of the things that's almost universal when we start talking about unplugging and like getting out, snapping children out of the same rut, out of their myopic view, it's like right. One of the roles I see as a father is to expose our children to different aspects of the world, right? To snap them out of their little reality and show them this is the wider world, right? Anytime I talk about this, pretty much everybody has some memory of a father figure doing that for them, whether it's a camping trip or a fishing trip or a hike or some experience that's like burned into their soul as a child themselves about feeling more connected to their parent and feeling connected to the vastness of creation, right? Yeah. So that is something we can do. Even if it's car camping, even if you just go out for one Friday night at a regional park and you go, jump in the water and do some fishing, like do that, sit around the campfire. And everybody can do that. Then you can keep dialing it back from there. The scouts are great and some of these groups that do it. And then the other thing I'll say is it all hinges on the loving presence of the parent, right? The kids will do just about anything to have that loving presence of their parents. So especially when they're younger, I used to do, there's an organization called Hand in Hand Parenting, and they have this thing called special time, right? That they think every kid should get. And this was such a game changer for us. So it was, you set the timer for 10, 15 minutes every day, and it's just child-led play. You get on your hands and knees, and whatever they want to do, you do it. You set the timer, that way it's not you ending it. The timer ends it, and you just follow them. And, for kids that run a little hot, I've got one of those that's like, runs hot. He just came in on fire, wanting to kind of tear everything down.
Mine too.
Special time is magical because once there's that connection that you were talking about, so much of the behavioral issues just get turned down. And it's following their own impulses. It's no screens. It's whatever they want to do. And getting them that daily dose of loving presence, especially from their father, it solved a lot of other problems, let's just say. And in a way, it's not a rite of passage, but it is establishing a bond that then is there when things get harder, when there are challenges, when there are behavioral issues, when there are whatever social challenges. That bond is much stronger, right? Because there's been this baked into their soul, this loving presence from their parents, right? So I'm just a huge proponent of this, and special time.
That is such a great tactical piece of wisdom. That daily special time is. I'm very highly motivated to start doing that today.
Let me know how it goes.
I definitely will. Yeah, I definitely will. And I feel like I have a good connection with my son. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like I don't have a systematic way to forge it. I haven't created a systematic way to forge it, and that is a good way to do that.
Yeah. Well, welcome to parenthood.
Right.
There is forever, for me, there's forever a gap between the parent I am and the parent I thought I would be. Yes. And that delta for me, there's just so much information there about what I could be doing differently. And so I love your impulse to kind of like create some structure around it. And because that's how I work too. It's like with the structure, with the daily rhythms, it kind of concretizes the parent I hoped I would have been. But I'm just here. I'm also here. I think I'm a few years ahead of you with the parenting thing. I'm here to tell you It never goes. I've never found anyone that's closed that gap yet. If you have, amazing, congratulations.
Yeah,
but I haven't met it.
You even meet people who seem like they have it just absolutely nailed, and then you corner them and you find out what they're doing, and it turns out that they're just as winging it as we are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think it's a feature of parenthood, and for those of us that are committed to this path of deep self-awareness. That in and of itself is one of the greatest teachers, is looking at that gap. And, so we could either just kind of blindly try to turn away from where we feel like we're falling short, or we use that as information in all these other ways, and we become a better human by really turning into the self-judgment.
I feel like this is one of the places where our culture has really done us as men of a certain age a disservice. Mm-hmm. Because it's almost like recognizing the places where you haven't been perfect is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's the only way you're going to grow. And so it's almost like you have to make that into a practice. You have to go seek out the places where you have fallen short of the ideal, and embrace them. Rather than considering that as a source of shame, you consider that as an opportunity for growth.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely, man. I would add, I think, another wrinkle on this is 3 of the most important words that we can say as parents are also, it's I love you, but it's also I am sorry.
Yeah.
I am sorry. Like, own our mistakes. We're not going to be perfect. And if we expect if we need our children to look at us as perfect, we're not only putting a lot of pressure on ourselves, but we're doing them a disservice, because then they'll never learn how to repair and how to heal after they mess up, which they will, just like we mess up. So, for me as a parent, I just, I try to read my children, especially the older they get, kind of read them into where I went wrong and where my thinking was off and what I wish I would have said differently, because I want them to be able to, own their own mistakes as well. So, yeah.
And if you raise the level of abstraction to what is the overall purpose of being a father, one component of that, one very important component of that, is make sure that the kid has the tools that you had to build, right? Mm-hmm. Make sure that he's standing on the shoulders of giants, not having to climb that same ladder, so that he can exceed what you managed to do.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And that the primary way to do that is these things that were sort of beaten out of us culturally. We need to give them healthy ways of expressing them.
Yeah. And there's no doubt that we will mess up our children. They're gonna end up with their own shortcomings and shadows because of the way we raise them.
That's part of them generating independence. They have to find the place. They have to cleave alpha the family. That's a healthy, good thing. Exactly. Yep. Right. So the hope is it's just incrementally better, right? They're not need, as you said, they can live off, they can build their life off of our mistakes and then go make their own mistakes. So give me something that you feel that you've personally done really well as a parent.
Yeah. I hope that both of my children look back and appreciate the connection they each have to the natural world and to a sense of wonderment and awe and beauty. My belief is that feeling wonderment and awe is a choice the older we get, right? Like, we can choose what part of our mind and what part of our soul and spirit we water. And so I've really just dedicated myself to getting them outside as much as possible, getting them off of screens, getting them connected to nature, getting their hands dirty, getting them, traveling with them to different places in the world to see different parts of the land, the ocean, and the people. So I hope that brings them a sense of magic in their life. I think it does. I look at them and I look at some of their friends who are on their screens all the time, and there is a sense of like, there's just a little extra energy, spring in their step, sparkle in their eye. And my sense is that's mostly has to do with the amount of time they spend outside.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been willing to fight for with them, to like have boundaries around screens and have boundaries around, and then, investing money and time to go to wild places.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't happen by default. You have to make it, you have to forge that path, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you feel is something, as you look back over your journey, what do you wish you'd done better?
Yeah. I think probably, for me, it's always about, my forever journey long before I had children, but then it gets exacerbated when we have these little beings that are so responsible for us. Yes. Is my sense of rigidity, like I can be, I joke around. It's like my German DNA of like this sense of needing everything a certain way, and that's my way, and kind of an inflexibility about me. And that's certainly something I've worked very hard on, kind of improving. But I think the children are naturally chaotic, naturally impulsive, and there's a great they need some tempering and some structure. But I think for me, I wish, especially early on, I would have been a little more flexible around that.
Yeah, I have that same tendency, and I feel like the rigidity comes from this place where you want to build something strong, right? You want to make sure that you're resilient. And it feels like being rigid is the only way to be resilient. And one of the unlocks for me has been discovering the concept of anti-fragility, meaning that you have a system that when it breaks, it automatically repairs itself somehow. And that concept, if you can cultivate that concept instead of rigidity is actually a problem. It's under strain. It can be brittle. It's strong until it's not, and then when it breaks, it fully breaks. Whereas something that's anti-fragile might break earlier than something that is rigid, but it tolerates the breakage more, and that's a way more powerful way to go about your life than trying to be rigid and inflexible.
Yeah, especially with little, little
Chaos
tornadoes.
agents.
Yes, little volcanoes that are
Yeah.
dependent on you for life.
That's right.
Yeah, so I love that. I love that anti-fragility and just kind of flexibility and adaptability. How much richer life is when we're living from that place rather than kind of hanging on too tight.
Yeah. All right, and I'm going to put you on the spot with this one.
Okay.
And I do this to everybody. And I didn't, and I caveat this with the fact that I did not warn you in advance that I was going to make you do this. But
Love it.
give me one principle that you either do try to live your life by, or you wish you tried to live your life by. Give me one good principle that I should adopt in my journey.
Okay. I think one of my most important principles is silence is noble. Meaning, when I make peace with the stillness that exists in my own mind, in the world around me, and I take time to cultivate a sense of silence and stillness, my whole life improves. Whether this is through meditation or just not always needing to have an answer for everything, for everyone. So for me, it cultivates a deeper sense of listening and understanding around the world, in the world around me, the people around me. I also see more clearly what needs to happen in my life. There's like a strategic advantage through the nobility of silence and just the basic usefulness of making peace with it. It's certainly made me a much better parent, being able to kind of slow down, take a breath, and see what needs to happen next, or calm a child, or protect them, or whatever it is. So for me, it's about that. The principle there is just shaking friends with stillness and silence.
I think that is really, really powerful. I feel like a lot of times our reaction, especially in this day and age, is it's like you have to have a take on something. So somebody says something provocative and it's like you have to have this instant take. And the fact is, you don't. The vast majority of things don't need your comment and are not going to be improved by your comment. And taking that beat and letting the silence just kind of cultivate a good response.
Yeah, I'll butcher this quote, but there's a quote that says something like, "If before I speak, I reflect and ask myself, does this what I'm about to say improve upon the silence?"
Yeah,
Right.
that's the perfect way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So earlier we talked about some specific tactical things that we can do as parents to install these, or to cultivate the conditions under which these transitions can occur, where these rites of passage can occur. And you mentioned three things, and I want to turn those three things into a challenge for anybody who's listening to this podcast. I want to turn them into a challenge. The first one of those things that I heard, and Luke, feel free to expand upon these or clear them up. The first thing is that daily special time. And just to recap, it's set the timer for 15 minutes and just do whatever your son wants you to do. And it can literally be anything, but the timer creates the beginning and the ending of the situation, and it's just that special time. And what that does is it cultivates that connection with your son that you will need when things get hard. The second one is joining a group. And Luke, your group, refresh my memory on what your group is called.
The Father-Son Connection Experience. So it's fathersonconnection.com.
So fathersonconnection.com or something along those lines is a really powerful way to get together with like-minded parents and people who are trying to cultivate this 200-year plan around getting us back to a place where we are creating good men. And then the last thing is you mentioned, Luke, that you do an annual camping trip. And I might think about abstracting that out a little bit. It's almost like you're doing an annual father-son challenge of some sort. You're enduring together something, and it's something you can look forward to, and it's something that is going to happen every year, and you make that happen. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great characterization. A couple other elements. It's away from screens. So all of these are away from screens, including the special time. Screens aren't included, but away from screens. And it's something in the natural world. So it doesn't need to be camping. It could be surfing together for a weekend or a day, or it could be, fishing, whatever it is. It's outside, it's in the wild. And then I'll add a fourth element to this. Okay. A fourth step here, which is what I do with both of my children. I ask both of them, what's one thing you would need from me this year so that you feel connected to me? And I let them tell me, and I try to reach that. And so for my son, literally every year since he's been 8, he said, I need a backpacking trip with you. And my daughter, it's different. It's different every year. This year, it's actually a backpacking trip, which I'm pretty excited about.
Wow, that's great.
But she's never asked for that before. So that's the fourth thing to do, is to actually go to them and say, and it's all about the connection. It's like, it's back to that loving presence that they'll do just about anything to get, right? Yeah. It's about, what do you need from me to feel connected to me this year?
It's so fascinating that I don't think it's ever occurred to me to ask that. And yet, it's a central focus of my role as a parent. I consider it to be a central focus as my role to a parent. But how am I supposed to know what's going to work if I don't ask my son? That blows my mind. That's such a simple concept, and yet it hasn't occurred to me to do it.
Yeah, and just trusting them that they know they have an impulse there. It may need a little bit of negotiating and kind of massaging, but the need beneath whatever they're presenting, it will be very clear, right? Let me know how that goes. I'll be super
I will
curious
definitely do that. I will get back to you on how all three of those things go.
Okay, great.
For me, and I will accept the challenge, and I invite anybody listening to this to do the same. Again, my Luke, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through this journey. I think this is such a powerful thing, and I think that that it is so good to talk to a fellow traveler, especially someone who's so much farther down the road I am in trying to cultivate this healthy masculinity and these rites of passage and that sort of thing. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. What a great conversation. And really cheering you on for this endeavor. Really excited about what you're doing with this show.
Thanks a ton.